Oh, yeah, sweet.
And cell phones down, please. Thank you. And all the way back, and you're good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Actually, it's afternoon. I'm sorry, I'm on LA time. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Toronto International Film Festival. I'm so thrilled to be here today with the people behind Seberg, which is, how do I say this? It's a beautiful, exciting, and kind of terrifying movie when you think about how timely it is. And I would actually just love to start at the beginning and ask everyone, what was your first experience with Jean Seberg? I mean, I remember seeing clips of St. Joan. I don't even think I saw the whole movie and being so taken by this, not just beauty, but this person who, imbued such, I guess, innocence in that role. I'm curious, like, when you saw her and what you sort of knew of her before this movie.
I have an indelible memory of the first time I saw her on screen, which was in my French class when I was 16 years old, where our French teacher would get prints of French cinema from the Alliance Française to help us learn French and see cinema. And we watched A Bout de Souffle, Breathless, her film with Godard, and her performance in that movie kind of blew my teenage mind. It still seemed to me when I saw it then an incredibly modern performance. There's something so unguarded and freewheeling and luminous in that performance. And at the end of the movie, she turns and looks down the barrel of the camera in a way that kind of no actress had at that point. And I think in that movie, she sets a kind of new path for what truth is in cinema and what acting is in cinema. I didn't know that when I was 16, it just blew me away, but as I began to work as a theatre director over the years, that performance of hers always stayed with me. I didn't know what happened in this window of her life in 1968 to 1970 until I read Anna and Joe's script and then started to dive into this period of her life and the kind of tragedy of what happened to that luminous life when the kind of surveillance weaponry of the state was turned against her.
Kristen, for you?
I had seen Breathless, and that was really the sort of singular encounter with Jean Seberg that I had before I read the script and met Benedict and talked about how to put this thing together. I think there's something in watching more of her films. Her first few performances are like some of my absolute favorite, and they were delivered in a time where, especially like in a commercial sense, things were really packaged and delivered in a much different way. People really stood and performed things in a really kind of what felt like prepared and skillful, way. And she was really kind of a sprawling energy, and I love her. I mean, like I'm a huge fan, and so I think in figuring out more about this particular slice of her life, kind of like really bowled over by the idea that this is like a new story, and became kind of like immediately protective of her because she does have something really available. She's incredibly available, and she went through a lot, which the movie, does its best to showcase. And by the end, those performances are really beautiful, but in such a different way because she is receded and she's just sort of like a few inches behind her face. And in the beginning, she was protruding, like she was just like coming out of herself in this way that was like so undeniable. And so yeah, initially I had this image-based idea of her, and I had this gestural kind of free, like sort of unwranglable cat. And we tried to do that for sure, but that was my initial, it was no deeper than that. And so it was interesting to get to know her through this experience.
As a fan, I mean, did you ever even dream you might play her someday?
No. No.
Joe and Anna?
Boring answer, Breathless. The performance in Breathless.
Yeah.
Just as a movie lover, obviously I watched it when I was quite young and was obsessed with her, just how mesmerizing she is in that film on screen. And it was Kate, one of the producers over here, who brought me 14 years ago some information about her life and said, do you know what happened to her? And I didn't, and started researching and found out this incredibly dark period of history, which I was interested in writing about anyway. And through Jean, it felt like there was a sort of perfect way to talk about her life through this pressure that she was under in these 2 years. And then Joe, well, you can talk about this yourself, but I think Joe was also really obsessed with Jean Seberg. Partly, I don't know, was it Breathless as well?
Breathless, yeah.
And then your grandmother.
My grandmother was an actress named Deborah Carr, and she'd made a movie with Jean in I think it's late 50s. It was with Preminger, and it was kind of his apology to Jean for how badly he treated her on St. Joan, and it's called Bonjour Tristesse, and Deborah was in that with Jean, so I got to talk to Deborah about who Jean was and what she was like and her memories of her, and I think it was interesting for me. Deborah's very much an actress of a previous generation, of an older studio system and an older way of acting, and I think Jean she described Jean as this sort of incredibly new, sort of fresh energy, and I was fascinated by her. I never found the story, and then Anna and I got together as a couple. We're married. We have 2 children.
Congratulations.
And this was the script. In a way, this is the script that began our relationship together as well, because I'd said, you've found the story about Seberg that I've always wanted to write. Here I have all my research, have all my books, all this, and sort of mansplained a lot of stuff about. Well, you've got to read this, and you have to know that. And eventually she sort of said, okay, let's write together. And so we wrote the script together, and we haven't stopped writing together since.
I am so happy that something joyous came out of this horrible tragedy of Jean Seberg.
A tiny chink of blue in an otherwise great story, but yes.
I remember you shared an amazing photograph of Deborah and Jean on set, like a behind-the-scenes photo, and you see this generational difference, but you also just see how alert and open and raw Jean is.
Totally.
At
I
that
think
age.
it's what you said, Kristen, that she's just so available. And you can see that in a way that, Deborah was almost the opposite of that. Nothing was available. It was all behind her. So, there was a fascination in her as a character. And then as you discover more about what happened to her, you just think why has this not been told before? Because Anna needed to figure the story out.
And Benedict, how did the script find its way to you, and what interested you in telling this story?
The script found its way to me through fantastic producers, Fred Berger and Brian Kavanagh-Jones, who I'd met with, and we dug each other and thought it would be good to do something together, and they started sending me a stack of stuff, and I think I was halfway through reading this, was like, this is the next movie I want to make. It immediately, both initially having that kind of fascination and that idea of who Jean was, but then the talk and tension in the writing, and this idea in the writing, which I found deeply cinematic and a kind of way into making the movie instead of being a traditional biopic, which I wasn't really interested in making of Jean, and her story is vast and there's so many stories in her life and the lives around her, but to focus on this window of this, really a story of privacy and the destruction of privacy to kind of intertwine her life with the FBI agent Jack's, so that you see the watcher and the watched, and you have a story of two lives interweaving where through Jack we experience him with the question, who is Jean Seberg? We experience his period of fascination and a growing obsession with her, but also then his awareness that he is involved in something deeply destructive and a kind of growing empathy towards her. But we know from him that she senses that someone is there watching her, and she's telling people someone's there. We know that they are, but they don't meet. They walk in parallel until that final scene of the movie. And I found that a kind of very beautiful way to tell this story about privacy. I was also really deeply fascinated with, I've been lucky enough through my life as a theatre director in the precious space of the rehearsal room to spend time being close with actors, and seeing the kind of bravery and vulnerability that they need to do their messy, beautiful jobs, and that involves putting every aspect of themselves on the line in front of the camera or on the stage. You got to go out there and put your truth and yourself into the character that you're portraying, and use every aspect of your memory and your history. And in Jean's story, we have someone who's trying to do that, who in the role she's choosing and the way she does, she's trying in this raw, instinctive way we've been talking about to do that. But at the same time, that very precious, vulnerable space is being invaded by the same mechanics that are used to make cinema, cameras and microphones. And I was deeply fascinated by that question of what happens to an actress, what happens to a woman when that pressure is put upon them. How do they survive that? How are they transformed by that? What happens with the paranoia of that experience? And that seemed still a very timely and urgent story to tell.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously, Seberg, the film, doesn't work without the perfect Jean Seberg, the character/actress. You have received phenomenal reviews and notices. Am I making you uncomfortable? Okay. I was just about, I mean, you...
I'm gonna have to kind of act like that.
I mean, obviously, you have had a very well-reviewed career. I believe you're the only actor to receive the César Award in France. So great reviews are nothing new, but this is really another level, because you are not only portraying this woman, you are channeling her in some way. And when you took on that role, was it intimidating, was it exciting, or both?
Yeah, it was scary, for sure. I mean, you can tell the way that he speaks about actors. He really gets, like, sometimes it's really, like, not what a director says to you. It's just having sort of, it's being accompanied and feeling like there's a certain energy that's so contagious. And I always felt, as from the first meeting that I had with him, that she was going to be held very preciously. And I don't know, like, yeah, it wasn't about doing it perfectly. It was definitely about being able to sort of do a sort of imaginative rendering of what it might be like to pull back the veneer of her life that was available to us in research, but really there was no way to know her inside of that period. You take like cumulative impression and just try and fiercely protect her. I just was, the intimidation factor and all of that plays into all of it. There wasn't a day that I didn't go to work sort of like, don't want to mess this up today. You know what I mean? Like, and also, I don't know. There was one day that my phone died and I was driving my friend's car because mine was in the shop and I didn't have a GPS system and I had no way to, like, I literally like flagged down a police officer and was like crying. I was like, there's a set and there's like somewhere around here and I'm screwed. He's gonna be so mad at me. And like, that is the feeling that you need to have going to work.
Yes.
Is like, and I get that from her. It's also kind of like, anytime there was a cat running across set, anytime there was something strange that happened, it felt spooky, ghosty, like just it felt pregnant, felt like full of something that was sort of like, yeah, we had this great responsibility, and maybe that's just like in our heads and we're making it up, but like there was shit going down that made no sense. And I was like, there she
Really?
is. Yeah,
Like
totally.
spooky?
Yeah, there were just moments that we were like, felt her, yeah.
I mean, you did Personal Shopper, so I have to ask, you must believe in ghosts.
Oh yeah, like that's actually what I do. Yeah, we're not making movies really. We're just like ghost hunters. Yeah, like
Also, why were there cats on the
elaborate
set?
ghost
What
hunters.
was
Really, like the first shot of the movie, we were setting it up. First morning of the shoot, it was a street shot on a street corner. This cat walked into frame and sat there. I'm like, I'm in the movie. And I remember saying to Rachel, "That's Jean." And then we were shooting like the night scenes in when Jean comes to Hakeem's house in Compton, and
this cat ran
it's
across
4
my
o'clock,
feet.
and
Yeah, and we were on the sidewalk. I wasn't even working in that particular setup. I was just there, and this cat was like all over our entire crew, just literally like all over people. And I was like, I mean, look, cats exist in the world, and that's not necessarily to say that, like, it just, like, yeah.
It's still
We're like, isn't this
eerie.
wild? Like, she was there. We're like, you guys are crazy.
And why did anyone take this cat, or it was just a stray?
I have a beautiful photo of Kristen as Jean stroking this cat at 3 a.m. in the morning on a corner in Compton. But
Wasn't it complete coincidence that the first public screening of the movie was on the 40th anniversary of her death?
that's right.
complete
So
coincidence.
last
So
Friday,
that was quite eerie, yeah.
yeah, last Friday in Venice was the 40th anniversary of the death, and that was a complete accident of programming
Really?
and biography.
And obviously, you're not making a documentary. You have to take some artistic license. You have to sort of imagine certain scenarios. But where did you even begin with your research as writers? Were you able to speak to anyone who knew her? I mean, obviously, you had a connection.
So I had a connection through Deborah and her husband, Peter Vittel, who was a mentor to me and a screenwriter. And so he'd remembered Jean in a certain way. That was our only sort of first-hand primary connection to her, and the rest is intense research, reading.
I met some people when I was living in New York when I started writing it, and I met quite a lot of people who were involved in politics and the FBI at that time. And obviously you can't, I mean, they're files, they've been heavily redacted. You can't get that much information, but we now know pretty much what they did to her. And I think I got some very interesting information about just how dark that period of American politics was and how the FBI was just out of control.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we spoke to people who were there, but we had to create a character to personify what happened through the FBI's eyes. We had to create somebody because there's no information about who, and there probably were many people involved in the case. So we chose to create a character to carry us through.
In Jack, who is
Yeah.
fictional. But everything Jack does is something the FBI did. I mean, his actions are all, you can track them through the released COINTEL
Really?
Yeah.
papers. As Anna says, many of them are still redacted, but the fake news letters that are published are all absolutely accurate. The dates and times of when they were bugging Hakeem and Jean is all accurate. So everything Jack does has a basis in fact, but Jack is himself a fictional creation.
And then those actual documents appear in the movie.
Those are real documents?
They're the documents that are available and that Jean would have had sent to her in the late 70s, or the mid-70s rather, as under a Freedom of Information Act. And one thing, the aperture of this movie is very specific and doesn't pretend to tell the whole story. We have glimpses of her life, and she described this period as a long nightmare that when she looked back, she couldn't tell the truth. So we're trying to find that truth in that. But it's interesting, so much of the biographical material, it's already a kind of fiction. The biographies have differing accounts of this period, but then also her husband, Roman Gary, he wrote a novel called White Dog about this period. The Mexican novelist Carlos Fuentes, who she had a relationship, also wrote a book, Diana, the Goddess Who Hunts Alone, also talking about it. So there's already this kind of fictional idea of her, but then Anna and Joe weave in all these facts in there. At one point she says to Hakeem that the the correlations between the racism in America and the Vietnam War being the same thing. And there's a quote of Jean saying that at a party. So I love how these truths are weaved into something that then also has a kind of speculative history. But in the end, we're trying to be truthful to that experience and invite the audience to get close to that experience of Jean.
There's so much material out there, you know, the movies, these books you talk about, but was there something that really helped you find her, even if it's just putting on one of those amazing costumes, which I hope you kept, because those are beautiful dresses, just a moment where you really felt like you discovered her?
Yeah, maybe one moment. No, I think her voice changes a lot. That was weird. There's no way to really like pin it down because really environmentally she's shifting a lot. There's like there are like, you know, we all have sort of default setting and then different versions of that. But hers were like pretty. There was a through line, but hers were like pretty distinct. And because this is like a sort of boiled down version of this person, you like take an image and something kind of more surface and then start deconstructing it and like watching it become a real thing that like breathes and is fallible and is vulnerable. And so yeah, I think like the way, like I was saying earlier, like just my way in was seeing her just later in her life. Like it was just like, there was no way to get very close to her other than through her work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think tonally we're really different. I think she enters a room and takes up space in a vastly different way than I do, and I wanted that sort of buoyancy and like lively kind of thing that she had since she was a little kid that I've only like begun to be able to like taste parts of as I'm approaching 30. You know what I mean? Like that she was. I don't know. I think like the screen test, few performances, like I would say like Breathless to Lilith to, I don't speak French, so it's hard for me to remember this title, but there's a sort of documentary style.
Les Autres Solitudes
Thank
of
you.
Philippe Gros.
So like,
He says it so nicely, too.
yeah, I only pretend to speak French. There's some footage that is strung together in a really sort of transient way that is so devastating and really like you're not quite sure what story is being told other than the story of this sort of like isolated and kind of like secluded by choice receding human. And it was like that. So yeah, I would say to go from that to that, like what was the limited resources that were available just were like so completely different, so polarized. And she was young when she died. She was 40 years old. Like, so, the time in between wasn't that long.
Yeah.
So even though our movie's only 3 years, or whatever, like 3 years or so, I just wanted to make sure that from 15 to 40, because we don't have much of an opportunity, it's not a biopic, I still wanted to feel that crashing. But I don't know when it all kind of seeped in. He helped a lot. He does a fucking solid impression of Jean Seberg.
You do an impression of Jean Seberg? Like
No,
the
like-
voice and everything?
Honestly, every time, like,
Gentle channeling in the purpose of helping.
he would like walk onto set and be like, and sort of wipe his hair away from his face, and I was like, you're there. And honestly, I'm breathing it. Like, I can feel it. I'm like, okay, let's go. I know, you don't even have to say anything. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
I mean, obviously, this movie talks a lot about the price of fame and the loss of privacy, and also someone who, just because they've achieved fame, doesn't stop searching for answers or a cause. And Kristen, as someone who's been in the public eye from such a young age, did those topics sort of appeal to you? I mean, you've said that you're different from Jean, you know.
Yeah, but I think we both have absolutely shared this sort of like fierce commitment to not trying to overtly control people's, especially public's perception of you, but just that you're inside of it. Mm-hmm. That somehow like you can't necessarily like, maybe you don't agree with someone's impression of you, but that's their impression of you. As long as you can vouch for yourself and like at the end of most experiences say, I mean, look, that was like me, so whatever like comes of it is fine. No, but the really frustrating and kind of gutting thing is when you feel like, stolen from. And that is like, and then to have like he was saying really well earlier, that this platform that you're usually allowed to utilize in a way that reveals you, even if you're shy or like, because Jean was not. She was like, we're different, tonally fine, but like we're actresses that want to be looked at because you have things and you want to share them and you want all of it back. And so when that is stolen and distorted and used against you, I've tasted that in like the most superficial way compared to her. But that was one thing that I was like, girl, I got you. I know that feeling. It's terrible. And it's great now. It's easier now because we have more control over how we're sort of communicating. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. People can go online and say whatever they want, and she didn't have that. I mean, I know it's like a kind of a sort of, okay, I sound like super pretentious, but like a reductive way of thinking about it. It's like, well, we have Instagram and we have social media, but it's like seriously different. Mm-hmm. She was so subject to whoever was interviewing her. She was like, the one interview that we have in the movie, the agent's sitting in the room, like saying like, Jean, we don't have as much of that, which is, great. Unless you want it, you know what I mean? It's just like now we have it in our hands a little bit more.
You're not on social media, are you?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're like, no,
I don't want to do it, but if I had to be like, they're lying, I could. You know what I mean?
Because in some ways I think it is better. I think that people can express themselves better. In other ways, it's this advent of technology, I think, makes it harder. I mean, you were cyberbullied by the president. Like that wouldn't have happened. Oh, was it? I'm glad that you can have a sense of humor about it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's like the most, like the least of. That was fun to laugh at, you know what I'm saying? Because like so much is not fun to laugh at.
Yeah,
it's like laughing at a funeral. You're
like,
oh my god.
I love that you worked it into your Saturday Night Live monologue. Which, by the way, you're one of the best Saturday Night Live hosts they've ever had. So yeah, let's get you back on there to do some comedy.
Yeah.
I am curious, though, because there are a lot of people who say, like, artists shouldn't talk about politics, which is hilarious, as though they're not human. But do you think that you sort of have a responsibility?
I mean, for me, certainly the responsibility is in the work. Like, as a theater director and as a filmmaker, I'm attracted to complex and difficult stories and to humans who sort of get to push to a limit of human behavior, and in that crisis, something is stripped away, and something they didn't realize they could find in themselves is found through that fire, and there's a politics in that, and in going into that crisis, and I think Jean had that in a very instinctive way. She was a truth seeker. She's a girl from the Midwest, from Iowa, who ends up the darling of the French New Wave, not through necessarily going out and trying to get it, but because she's a truth seeker, and I think that was in her the openness and idealism of her politics, but also in the choices she was making as an actress and as a lover. She said something like, between a career and the adventure of life, I choose the adventure. And there's a responsibility and a politics in living like that too, I think.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it's all stories are political in some way. I mean, a superhero movie is a political act and can be. Captain Marvel is a political movie. Black Panther is a political movie. So I think, are you really asking that we should keep our personal politics to ourselves and not promote them through our movies? I mean, maybe. What do you think? I mean,
I just think it's kind of dense. Like, I think there's no way to avoid every person that you associate with, every word, step. You're representing how you function, and it's like how you react to the world is political and human, and there's no difference between those two things. And well, whatever, fucking, yeah.
I think it's just because
Yes is the answer.
politics has become so divisive recently, and it's become a different conversation. In the past, I don't think that there was so much scrutiny about how people in the public eye voted or but it just seems to be very, very polarized all over the world at this point.
Also, like, what kind of art do you want to watch? Like escapism is rad, but like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't think there's a difference between those two things. So the question in itself is like kind of impossible to answer. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. Not your question, but the thing of like someone going, you know, people shouldn't put politics in art. It's like, have you ever heard of art? What are you talking about?
In the movie, Jean says something like about like refusing to accept the lies. And we live in a moment where, like you see in the movie, you see a lie manufactured as a weapon and used against Jean, but we live in a moment where politics are using actively using lies and disinformation to divide people and to kind of spread hate. And so truth doesn't necessarily have to be a didactic thing, but I think each artist has their responsibility to kind of pursue truth in their work, and yeah.
You're allowed to make art. You're in a pretty like insanely privileged position, and that's political in itself.
Yeah.
Like, the impulse to make it and then be able to do it. Like, yeah.
Before I open it up for questions, I actually want to talk about the rest of the cast because you have an amazing ensemble here. I don't know, maybe it comes from your theater background that you put together every role so perfectly. You've got Margaret Qualley, you know, Jack O'Connell we mentioned, and you have the brilliant Anthony Mackie. Where did you? I'm sorry, that keeps popping up once in a while. I feel like you're taking aim at me. But where did you even begin? Did you start with your Jean, basically?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a phenomenal cast, and I always think of like Jean and Kristen as the supernova at the center of the movie. And it's easy to talk about Jean and Kristen in it, but around her, I think this is one of the beauties of the movie is we get close to this group of people who are all wrapped up in this same storm, whether that's Vince Vaughn's character as the kind of politically absolute opposite of Jean and of Hakeem and Dorothy, watching the kind of his mechanisms to destroy those relationships, but at the same time we get a glimpse into the mess and turmoil in his family life. So
Vince scared me.
Oh my God, he's terrifying.
Yeah. Not just because he like throws cups and stuff, but just that feeling like.
You mean in the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. He was so great. He was so great in it. It made a part that could have been kind of one note. Just really like you see why someone.
And I think it's a testament to the writing that actors wanted to get on board. Yeah. Like even in the Margaret's role, she found the kind of detail and complexity in that. I had worked with Jack in the theatre. Around the time we were casting this, he did Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. He played Brick in a production in London, and he just seemed to me the kind of perfect guy to play Jack. Colin Meaney, who's also, the cast goes so deep, but Colin played Big Daddy in that same production, and Zazie is so fantastic in this movie, and the scene where they meet is kind of like for me, one of the centerpieces of the movie, and an extraordinary meeting between the two of them. So I just feel privileged to kind of go to set every day and work with such an extraordinary cast who just were in love with the material and brought a lot of tenderness to that.
Your chemistry with Anthony is fantastic, and I don't just mean sexual chemistry, although that's obviously important to the movie. I love the way you guys play off each other. Did you know him at all before this?
No.
Wow.
No.
I mean, chemistry is a weird thing to explain. Do you have any idea why it works or why it doesn't?
No. It's I can say that it's really painful to have to create it if it's not that like fabricated thing. Because like Anthony's he's really good for this part because like he also really loves speaking, and I really love listening to him. It's that part was very real.
Yeah.
I mean he's he's also he's also incredibly available.
Yeah.
It's really nice to have. Yeah, I mean I was really lucky to have him because like I said, I was kind of scared of this part. I think especially with him, she has this. Her hunger is like she wears it like it's a, like you could, you know what I mean? Like, like, and you know, I felt good with him. I felt like I could kind of like play with him. And yeah, that's not easy. Yeah, so got really lucky.
There are so many tragedies in this movie, but one is that, you know, I think that Jean is fighting for a great cause and it doesn't exactly work out. Things, am I allowed to talk spoilers? I'm not even sure, actually. Yeah, I mean, do you guys know how it ends? Okay. But in some ways she hurts her cause, and it's heartbreaking. But, you know, I feel like she wouldn't have done things differently. I don't know how you feel.
I don't know. I don't think she would have done things differently. And I think there's an interesting parallel that in these two characters, in Jack and Jean, Jack the FBI agent, in that I think they both set out to do the right thing with the best of intentions and realize they're doing exactly the wrong thing. And I think it's much more sort of painful and raw for Jean. I think we're drawn to those stories of well-meaning liberals who sometimes blunder into situations that they don't fully understand and can't fully assimilate. And I think that was something we wanted to explore in this. And I think it comes out really nicely in the relationship with Dorothy Jamal.
But I don't think she would have done anything different. And
Yeah.
I think Jean, as a character, as a human being, was just constantly drawn to causes. She felt, I don't know if she felt guilty, but she certainly wanted to help and she wanted to heal. And she used to kind of take in stray cats and dogs off the street. And she joined the NAACP when she was 14. And she just wanted, and she grew up in Marshalltown, Iowa, where dancing with an African-American guy at the prom got him beaten up. And there was a whole history of her being interested in supporting people who were having trouble. And I think, you pay the price.
Yeah.
She paid the price. But I think part of her mental breakdown was because she wasn't willing to give up her ideals and her beliefs and who she was. And so to be told, no, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to be this person, drove her literally insane. I mean, she just couldn't live in a world where she wasn't able to be who she was.
Her husband, Romain Gary, said she had a case of sympathy at first sight.
Yeah.
Sure, I want to take some questions from the audience. We'll just start right here in the front. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a microphone.
For Kristen? Okay. There's a whole generation that is growing with you since Panic Room, Twilight, and there might be a time when someone might do a movie about your life.
Ooh.
So, looking back in your beginning, is there a very good moment that you like to remember today?
Ooh.
Well, I'm not ready to write my memoir. No, I feel like they are small and mine, and definitely not story worthy yet. But no, I have so many. I've been crazy lucky since I was 9 years old to have the most fulfilling and inspiring and just consistently stimulating experiences through art and weird things. I can't really pick it. There's not one moment where I look back and go that was it. Thank God, because that would be sad. I'd be yeah. So not fun answer, but there you go.
Wait, if they did make a movie of your life, who would you want to play you?
I could kill it. You should do it. You think I'm gonna cast someone other than myself? No, I'm
It's
kidding.
between
I don't
you and
know.
one other person. I think it's going to be you.
Yeah.
You might have to audition for yourself.
Oh, I love auditioning.
Do you really?
Let me earn it. When
When was the last time you auditioned?
It's been lame. I auditioned. I auditioned for Cafe Society.
Really?
Yeah, that was a later audition.
Most actors don't like the process.
Theoretically, I like the process.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't have to do it as much as look, I used to not love auditioning, but there is something about kind of proving yourself in a room, not only to the people that you're going to be working with, but also to yourself, because it's a huge, scary thing saying before you know you can do something that you can do it. And you're also telling a whole load of people that really love this thing and have put a lot of time and money and effort and love into something. And so to be yeah, I can do that. You're how do you know? You've never done it.
Yeah.
So there's something about it that is, like, you know, you can start, the few days leading up to the start of production is like less nauseating at times.
Absolutely, because you've proven yourself.
Yeah, you just sort of feel it. I mean, you can like rehearse and do whatever, but like it kind of feels good to be like chosen.
Yeah, yeah.
Actors love that.
Right down here? Sorry. Oh.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Rebinal on Cinema from the Spectrum. My question is for Kristen. I want to know, what was the process like for getting into character as Jean Seberg, and did you also find yourself having a lot in common with her as a person too?
I felt like I needed to just take some of the weight out of my body and my voice. That was like primarily the thing. He would always go, like, you know, there was this sort of flitting buoyancy that she had that was rad, and not something that I definitely, it's not my go-to. It's not how I function. And I had a really, really, very, very talented dialect coach. And yeah, sorry, I'm losing myself. So no, and like in terms of having anything in common with her, I definitely mentioned here, and I don't want to like sound redundant, but she wanted to tell stories because she wanted to get closer to people, not because she loved the attention. She definitely did. Like loved being a performer, but was never performative in the way that that word kind of maybe implies that there's lies in there. And you just get that immediately from her, and some actors are the opposite of that. And I, you know, would like to say that's my impulse. I can't say that I like have that, because that'd be weird to talk about yourself in that way. But yeah, in terms of prep, yeah, I was really kind of preliminary, watching a lot of movies, and then just kind of forgetting that those details were sometimes kind of impossible to nail, which actually behooves the story, because you want to see someone living. You don't want to see someone like pretending.
I think you also, based on what I limitedly know about her career, you have always seeked out really fascinating collaborators. You haven't made, I think, what people would say necessarily easy or even commercial choices. And she seemed more interested in, you know, telling these stories and working with people that she wanted to be collaborating with.
Yeah.
I feel like you have that in common.
Yeah, I don't think that she was really very tactful. Yeah, quite the opposite. So in that way, absolutely, I can identify with that.
The one down here in front. Then hand it to her, sure.
Hi, I'm Alessandra from Italy, De Tomasi from Italy. I would like to ask to Kristen Stewart. Of course, your art as an artist will live forever, but as a human being, what would you like to be remembered for?
Ooh. I want to say these shoes, because I've been dying over them all night, sorry.
I will be remembered by my Doc Martens. Good club to be in, too. There's a lot of people remembered by Doc Martens that are, oh yeah. Sorry. I don't know, man. That's like, I mean, like, this is lame. Like, if anyone were to be like, how was she? Was she cool? It's like, dude, she was really nice. That's like, my favorite people are like, that. And then that usually will inform like everything you do, like in your art and your politics and all that. And there's a really awesome trickle-down effect of being really nice. Like, you get a lot back. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Mamen from La W Radio. I would like to ask you, Kristen, if this is a character that you had in your list to do, and why did you decide to say yes to this movie?
Oh, why'd you say yes?
Again, I said yes because I felt like Benedict could tell this story, and that it was safe, and not in a way that was not without risk, but one that was it just had integrity. I just felt like it's rare to trust an instinct so kind of confidently, and I was very sure that I was going to be working with the right people. I've really never taken a job that I haven't gone like, I know that like we're both safe here. So like that, and she wasn't on a list of characters. I don't really have like, I know some people that like have a lot of ideas about like projects they want to do. I don't know that I want to do something until it like hits me in the face. I can't, because it's such a weird impulse. It's such a weird, this particular art form, to not diminish that in any way, I don't know what I'm doing, but like, you can't do it without anyone else. Yeah. It's the only one. It's like there, you can, yeah, I mean, you can sit and play pretend, but that's scary and not normal and not acting. That's when but like, so I could never project into the future in terms of the characters that strike me and the people that I feel will protect those characters. They happen upon you.
This movie, though, set decades ago, still feels so timely. And I'm a very paranoid person in general, but after watching this, I definitely was like, I wasn't tearing the house apart looking for bugs, but I was definitely a little paranoid about privacy. Did you guys find that it sort of upped your paranoia working on it?
I think we're so used to it. I mean, I think the world has changed enough now that we assume we're being listened to, right? I mean, you think if you have a phone in your pocket, that someone can hear you. There's a microphone on your phone. And so I think at this time in the 60s that no one was aware of that. That's why you got so many great movies in the 70s, because they're paranoid. Yes. And it was like your government's screwing you, and no one, you know, that's the big punchline. Now we just assume everyone's screwing us and everyone's listening to us. And every email I send, I just assume that anyone who I talk about in an email can see it.
Yeah. I agree.
And
Anthony was saying like he would never have like Alexa in his house.
Alexa
I don't
is listening to you and recording everything.
Absolutely.
I have it.
You do?
Yeah, I was like, okay, cool. I mean, like, what are you listening to? I don't know. Like,
Exactly.
go for it. And if you find yourself sort of being persecuted for something, as long as you've done it from a true place, you're like, okay, cool. I can't control it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so I think we are much, much more open to the possibility of it. It's an appalling idea.
How accepting we are,
too. I have walked past
Yeah.
stores in London and then received sort of adverts for those stores. And I'm sure that you get trapped. Of course all this stuff is going on. So yeah, and I think social media, like you were saying, it gives us all an opportunity if we need to defend ourselves. But at the same time, it's born, I think, the divisiveness that we were talking about earlier. It's a very complicated time and we're just sort of getting used to it.
I found it terrifying in the movie how you sort of see the culture we live in like the Petri dish form in 1968. You see an analog version of the surveillance culture we now live in, but you also see when Vince is typing out that letter and it's going out into the world, you see this production of fake news. Yep. You see the divisions, and I wanted to, in the story, to go back into that without it feeling like we're nostalgically looking back, but it had the kind of urgency of a contemporary story, and by getting close to both sides of that experience, that it would kind of, you know, echo with our world as well.
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to thank you for a beautiful, terrifying, timely, really nice homage to this amazing actress. Thank you guys so much for being here. Congratulations on all the wonderful response. Thank you guys for being a great audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're like the best at this. Some people are so bad at it. You're so good at it.
I was like, hey, for this actually. I wasn't going to come to Toronto this year. And then they asked me about this, and I was like, yeah, I'm going. Yes, that hang around the ruins and stuff, and there was like, yeah. I'm telling you, I believe more.
I had a weird one when we were talking about this. For some reason, suddenly suddenly appeared. It was just there every day. We had these conversations like, I just know. Well, this was before? Yeah. Before